The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not reflect the views or endorsement of any entity. Nothing being said on this podcast should be considered as investment advice. Derek is affiliated with Collab Plus Currency and may hold positions in assets discussed in this episode. Always conduct your own research and consult with a financial advisor before making any investment decisions.
Gentlemen, we are live. We are here for another episode of 100 Proof. The genetic makeup of this episode is a little bit different than we've had in the past. It's going to be fun. There's going to be hot takes. I want to welcome my two co-hosts for today's episode. We've got Eli. Welcome, Eli. Do you want to give a quick background on who you are? I think most folks know who you are, but for those that are tuning in for the first time.
Yeah, so great to be back here with you guys. I'm the head of art at Proof, and we've got lots to talk about today. It's going to be a fun show.
And then Sam, who you all know, the legendary Sam NFT Statistics, Punk 9059, is back in the co-host seat. Sam, welcome back. For those that aren't familiar with you want to give your quick intro?
Sure. I'm the director of research at Proof, and have a daily show that talks about what goes on in the market every day, and love to come on and chat with you guys.
Let's go. And we just actually dropped off with the legendary Adam Lindemann. Adam Lindemann is a very, very famous art collector. He's written the book on collecting contemporary art. He's got this awesome auction tonight, an evening auction at Christie's, that is getting a lot of attention. There's this awesome New York Times article that was just published recently about Adam and the life of his collecting work. And we had a chance to jump on for a few minutes with Adam and just dropped off, and that will be coming up later in the episode. And we also have one more final announcement before we jump into the topics of the day. Eli, we've got a Mika Tajima drop coming up with Pace. Maybe you can spit a little facts on what's going on there.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks, Derek. As you said, we've got this drop coming up at Proof with Pace Gallery and the artist Mika Tajima, who was in Grail's season 3 that just wrapped up recently. And this is such an interesting project, and it's been such a great collaboration with Pace and with Mika. Mika's taken Twitter sentiment data, run it through a custom algorithm, a custom sentiment algorithm, then uses Unreal Engine to create these unique outputs. And there's 1,152 of these outputs, all ranging in color and density and speed, these 15-second animations. And that's dropping next week, March 15th. Incredibly excited for that, for this partnership with Pace and with Mika. And yeah, man, this is the start of a lot more that we're going to do on the traditional art side of things, and excited for this one in particular.
Awesome. Well, let's get the show started. I'm stoked we get to do this three-way conversation. I've got two of the Gigabrains that are part of the Proof squad, and you guys both bring a very unique and specific lens to how you're thinking about this space. And I think the topics that we're going to run through today kind of have all of your interests collide. So this is going to be a fun one. Why don't we start with the first story, which is what the heck is happening with AI art? It's having a moment. Brain drops, which we've talked about here on the show before. The volume is just going crazy. Sam, you can talk about some of the data and the stats you were able to pull this week. But from what I saw, we're up 4.5x. Most of these collections are up 4.5x on average in 2023 alone. They just hit 25 million in secondary volume this week. We've got artists that launched collections on Brain drops that are now showcasing work at the Louvre. Guys, is AI having a moment or what?
I mean, from my side, the data certainly says it is, and what's interesting about Brain drops is this is a project that was launched in 2021, so this is not just some sort of new concept that everyone's getting on the hype train for and building out of the gate. This is something that, Justin Trimble has been grinding on, the artists have been grinding on for a long time. And it just feels like right now it's having that moment. I feel like you have I think a few things. One is Pinder Van Arman and Claire Silver are both just such great kind of leaders of the space and leaders of Brain drops. Both they're two of the genesis artists for the project. And then the second thing is I think think Life in West America was a really interesting project because it was unique in that it had this real cool cohesion to it. And, we've talked about it extensively on the show, but this cohesion to it, it kind of had this relatability while at the same time being like so crazy and weird that it kind of felt like it put a flag in the moment of where we are. So I think you put all that together, and obviously, the Claire Silver moment with the Louvre is such a huge piece of it. But all those other pieces, you put them together. The fact that Life in West America went to 10 ETH floor made people realize, holy cow, like owning AI art, owning brain drops can really be lucrative. It brought more eyes onto the product. And I don't know, I think that it all just kind of combined to get us where we are now.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Like within our space, the volumes are, as you guys just said, like things are going kind of crazy there. But then, I think Claire's work being at the Louvre and Pindar having worked there previously, and at the same time as Claire's work is there, Rafik Anadol has worked at the MoMA, and then Gagosian, one of the top galleries in the world. They have an AI exhibition upcoming in the next couple of weeks that will run for a month in New York City. And so we're seeing this broad adoption of AI and acceptance of AI from the most important institutions in the world in a way that, is super interesting to observe beyond our little world here and the volumes and the liquidity and the things happening here in Web3 and with NFTs. So, that's been compelling to watch. Maybe I'll throw this to you, Derek. From a collector sort of curation perspective, one of the things I struggle with a little bit at the moment, and this is certainly on me, is that I don't have a high fidelity understanding of the tools and the process and the prompting that's going into some of these works. And so by extension, it makes it a little bit more challenging for me to come to the table with a nuanced perspective, both as a collector and in some respects as a curator, when I'm looking at these different bodies of work on the AI side. How do you think about some of that? Where do you think we're going? How do we do some of that education maybe?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I think the first thing I will say, just to kind of set the foundation for this conversation, is, creating art and creating artistic endeavors has always drawn upon material palettes that have changed over time. And so whether we're talking about etching and carving into stone, or, the pencil and the paper and paints, or computer art when it was really first starting to get going, I would say nothing has really changed. Art and making art itself has always been about using tight constraints and wielding them into new directions and imbuing a point of view or a perspective based on the work that came before and reflecting upon, the time around you and the work around you at any given moment. And I don't think that's changing here. I don't think it changed with on-chain generative art. These are still just materials and palettes that are being pulled on, and those constraints are being used and pointed in very specific directions to say new creative things. And I don't think that that's changing here with AI art. I mean, we're seeing the creative process find its form in the ability to train these models to ingest very specific images or work, to be able to upscale the actual body and the composition of the work itself being pointed and or narrowly scoped to say a specific thing or to convey a specific idea. So just holistically, the way I like to think about this is this is still very much like the world of art and the constraints of art and the artistic process is just being embodied in a new medium. Now, your question you asked, because I don't think I'm actually answering your question, is how do we actually start like training and educating and letting people understand how these processes work? And I think it's this is where I think there's like an amazing opportunity for context and education to be paired with every work that we see, and to really give audience members who are previously able to see how something would be created with, oil on canvas, give them an inside baseball look at how, these models are being used, or these images are being generated, or how these things are being trained, letting them peer through the glass a bit to see that creative process, to convey why an artist like Claire Silver is different than, Rup, who created Life in West America. And I think it's only going to come with education and context building and giving that inside look into those creative processes that are going to allow people to see how the stuff was created, why it's being created, and conceptually, why certain work is maybe pointed creatively in a different direction than another piece of work.
Yeah, I think so well said, Derek. And like, that's always something I think about, even with generative art. It's like, how can we take collectors under the hood to better understand what's happening at the level of the code and the algorithm, so that they can show up, so that they can collect, so that they can think about works with a much more nuanced perspective.
Yeah.
There's so much opportunity there. I'd love if at Proof, we started to build that muscle and do that education work.
Yeah.
Because of course, the output can in and of itself be something that one deeply resonates with, and sort of that's the primary dimension with which one collects, of course. But having those additional layers of understanding, I think, can only serve us well as we move forward across these different verticals, these different mediums, these different types of work.
I was just going to ask you, Derek, kind of what you look for when you're thinking this is an AI artist I want to collect versus this isn't. And I guess the context for me is I once created an image on I Googled AI art generator. I created something and I showed it to a friend, and people were like, oh, you should mint that. When's the open edition? And like, obviously that is, it was in no way worthy of being minted, but a lot of really cool art can be created really quickly with AI. And I'm curious how you differentiate yourself between what is a bozo like me kind of spending 5 minutes on something I'm not very familiar with something that belongs in a museum and has that kind of provenance.
Well, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, because I don't think that you're a bozo, and especially not creatively. I've seen, I think I've gotten a glimpse of some of your photography, and I think we're all waiting for the day where you start training a model on your body and your composition of work, and starting to create some cool outputs, Sam. So we're going to continue that part of this conversation down the road. But
that's right. I've seen those GM tweets, the photography.
Exactly.
We're waiting,
Sam.
Right.
We're waiting, Sam.
All right. Well, let's talk AI.
But in the meantime, I think this is like where the role of the curator, or the role of the vertical marketplace, or the role of experts, whether it's fellow artists or fellow collectors who are technologically savvy in terms of like the differentiation in terms of how work is being put together. This is the beautiful thing about the internet, is like you can actually point attention very quickly towards answering that question based on the folks that are dwelling and spending time thinking about this work on a day-to-day basis. It's also one of the reasons why I think Braindrops continues to see this massive resurgence. They authentically put themselves in a position very, very early on at the intersection of AI art and Web3, and story told and curated and found amazing artists that were doing different things, and didn't dilute the body of work over time that would launch on Braindrops. I think only a dozen artists have ever launched on that platform, maybe a little bit more at this point. And each of those collections over the last 2 years were carefully hand selected by the team. And it's only a couple of folks. It was, those works themselves were story told. They were paired with really great research and really great, I think, creative and conceptual ideas, so that we now have this, vertical marketplace that's done the legwork of demonstrating these early attempts of making creative work at the intersection of AI and Web3 over a long period of time. Now we're finding folks are gravitating towards that, because a lot of that upfront work that you're asking, Sam and Eli, has been done by this one platform. And I think we see forms of that over and over and over again on the internet, and that could be through soft curation, through research. It could be hard curation through things like Braindrops. But I think it's the amalgamation of all this stuff that really allows people to collect confidently some of these outputs.
Yeah, I love that thinking, Derek. And just super quickly, wanted to call out, when we talk about Braindrops, we sometimes call out a few of those collections, right? Whether it's Pindar's work, Claire's work, Life in West America. There are a couple others I think worth mentioning. A few of my favorites. We have Confluence by Devi Parikh. I remember when this dropped, I don't know, 8 months ago now, perhaps. I was on FX Hash trying to collect some of her work over there beforehand, and not pumping my bags. I own none of these, but love that collection. Love the work by Sophia Crespo and Entangled Others that dropped on Braindrops as well. And then separate from Braindrops, this collection Sightseers by Norman Harmon, I believe Pindar helped maybe produce that project. And I apologize if that's not the case, but I think that's true. That's a super compelling project as well.
Yeah. Well, we've actually got a new Braindrops collection to that end, Eli. A new Braindrops collection is coming out tomorrow, March 12th at 12:30 p.m. Central Time. It's called Materia Mania, and it's a collection by Huemin, Huemin, and it's a collection of abstract AI-generated forms set against a solid black background. And just to give a quick description on how the piece was created. A custom generative art diffusion model was fine-tuned on 120,000 image text pairs to produce high-fidelity abstractions of base images. And then 25,000 base images were generated and upscaled to a resolution of 4096 by 4096. And then an aesthetics rating system, a model, was developed to then generate the most aesthetic outputs out of those upscaled images. And so you can kind of see how the creative process was applied to those initial constraints over time to get the body of work that we're seeing tomorrow drop on Braindrops Materia Mania at 12:30 p.m. So this will be a fun one to check out. I haven't spent enough time on the collection to kind of go through some of these sample outputs that are getting created. I know there's a description on Twitter and on Braindrops, but this will be one to keep an eye on.
I was hoping we'd get the Babe Ruth that you gave on Life in West America.
Not giving
it.
At
0.06 ETH, goes to 10 ETH, and Derek's calling it the week before.
We'll reserve judgment until I've spent a little bit more time there. But I always am excited to see what launches on Braindrops, and this will be a fun one to kind of track. Let's move on to the second story. I know we don't have a ton of time because we have Adam Lindemann coming up here in a few moments. But eye-popping sale for Yuga this last week in a completely new category, generative art, using kind of the ordinals and inscriptions constraints on Bitcoin. Sam, maybe you can kick us off and tell us a little bit about the craziness. I mean, like the auction itself, where bids came in, how much was generated, but this was eye-popping.
Yeah, so they auctioned off 288 of these ordinals, and it's in the first 12 hours. The highest bid was two Bitcoin, which is something like 32 ETH or 30 ETH, something like that. And then over time, that high didn't even make the top 288. I think the minimum bid was 2.25 Bitcoin. The top bid was over 7 Bitcoin. The top 2 or 3 were in this like 4 to 7 range. And then it really fell off and you had a bunch of bidders in like the 2.5 to 3 range. I think they made $16.5 million on it. So, there was a lot of controversy around it, at least in terms of the talking heads. I don't think there was a ton of controversy as far as the participants. We didn't hear stories of people not getting their money back. Like everyone who participated, I think, thought it was a good experience, from the sellers to the buyers, was my experience, but correct me if I'm wrong. But there was a little bit of the idea that others might replicate what they did, which was you had to send them Bitcoin kind of you had to basically trust that they were going to send you the ordinal and they were going to send you your money back if the bid didn't go through. Stuff like that was a little bit controversial, but by and large, I think it's interesting. I think Yuga has just shown that they're kind of, I just think the Bored Ape success can't be argued, and what they've been able to do in the PFP space. And I think when they bought CryptoPunks, they showed they wanted to get into the historic game and, other aspects that were different from cartoon monkeys and games and stuff like that. Like they wanted to be elsewhere, and they built a team of over 100 people with great designers. So when they did this, it felt like it was kind of on the front foot, but I don't think it was, I wasn't too surprised that they were out there doing something people didn't expect, because I think that what they have been good at doing throughout is stuff that people don't expect. I think they have shown, if you've talked to Gordon, if you've talked to some of these guys, you can tell these are serious guys who respect the space. And I think that this was kind of maybe a nod to that. So I don't know. That was my quick takeaway.
Yeah. Interesting. I guess, one question I have for both of you, and Sam, this is sort of dovetailing from your comment. Do you think for Yuga, is this a first step in doing sort of more things on the generative art side? Or do you think the conditions here with ordinals in particular, this was sort of a one-off, this was an ad hoc thing and it was sort of capturing this moment? If you had to project or speculate a little bit on this, what do you think, Derek?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think a lot of things about what I saw. I agree with some of the notes that Sam made here. Yuga clearly is in pole position as it relates to like an authentic Web3 brand. I mean, they're doing all the things that you want to see. They are consistently, keeping attention around the immersive environment they're building. I know there's a upcoming beta test for folks coming up here pretty soon, another play test for the environment. They are dropping mini games and generating millions of dollars in sales from those mini games through things like Dookie Dash. They're building multiple forms of IP across the board, whether it's Meebits or Punks or the Bored Apes. They are constantly keeping a pulse on what's going on and the kind of the creative experiments that are happening across our tiny little space. And I think that leads me to the TwelveFold project, which was, kind of a brilliant generative art experiment thing that captured a lot of attention, used the constraints of this new emerging ecosystem, felt like there was some, I think, decisions around the auction process that folks pushed back on, but for the most part, felt like an authentic flag planting into that ecosystem as attempting to understand the constraints and put a body of work on there that didn't dilute any of the productive ecosystem stuff that they're doing elsewhere in Yuga. It felt like very much a standalone collection. So I like seeing stuff like this, and I would say, if anything, they're proving that they have an amazing audience that just wants to, be a part of these different goods, these different LVMH style value capture goods that are being dropped all over our tiny little space. And so earning $16.5 million in 24 hours is like no small feat in this market, especially in an adjacent vertical to one that they normally operate in. So they are clearly doing something right and getting something right over there.
Yeah, and just very quickly, guys, I think that one of the things I admire most here is their ability to be nimble and have an experimentation muscle. At an organization of that size, things can very quickly slow down, and that hierarchy of decision making that is often the case at an organization that's 100 plus is a real thing. So I sort of like that they're being nimble and willing to experiment here. I think that's just sort of core to the ethos of what everyone's doing here, and so I'm glad that that's not lost.
Yeah, both Frank from DGods as well as Gordon Goner, I've heard them both say we want everything we do to break the internet. Whenever we do something you didn't expect it, and we want you to say, "Holy cow!" Like that was just completely unexpected. So I think there's a little bit of, I don't know if you're going to see more of this. I think I think it's kind of very specific to this kind of crazy moment we've had with ordinals in general. The other thing I think on that format, the risk is that other entities start doing this, and I said this on my show. I said, look, like sending money to Yuga Labs is probably something that you should not worry about. Like this is an entity that I think has built enough trust in the ecosystem that like they will send back and they will honor this as most organizations would. But if people start seeing this and thinking this is something that can become a status quo, that's when the scammers start emerging. And that's when kind of the real dangerous stuff starts emerging. And a lot of people who are scammers are quite good at building trust. So, I think it's certainly not a status quo that I think the space wants. So if I were to say anything that I kind of hope on the downside is that we don't see a continuation, I guess, or kind of that we find better trustless ways to run these auctions in the future.
Yeah, well said. And I totally take your point and agree on the auction side. I think that was a pushback that was deserved, and I think you laid out clearly, the problems and that could arise out of that in the future. And a lot of this is moving fast, breaking things, keeping attention, and hopefully optimizing over time to run a better playbook. We've got Adam Lindemann coming on right now just to set the stage. He's no stranger to the show. He's been on twice. We did this awesome live recording with him and Marfa about 6 months ago. Kevin did a one-on-one with him maybe about a year ago. We're going to cut to that in a moment, but we spend some time talking about, a technical and cultural discussion about Adam's career, his collecting style, his support, educating the industry with literature. He's been a guest writer for major publications in addition to writing the book on contemporary art. in the mid 2000s, all the way through this amazing evening auction that's happening tonight at Christie's at 6:30. And so it's a very fun conversation. We'll kick it to that. We'll kick over to that now. But enjoy that interview. Adam, it's great to have you back on 100 Proof. This is, from what I remember, this is the third time you've been on the show. You did an episode with Kevin maybe about a year and a half ago. You joined me and Kevin live recording in Marfa, Texas at Glitch Gallery at the end of last year. And now you're back today for a very special recording and episode because you've got an amazingly important auction that's happening tonight titled Adam. So welcome back on the show, Adam. And it's great to have you back in the saddle here.
Thanks, Derek. And I've never been on with Eli before. So this is exciting. This is old but new, and it's never old with you. So I'm happy to be here.
What I have enjoyed in all of like the off recording conversations I've had with you over the years, and also some of the on recording conversations we've had, that I think would be fun to kind of set the stage with before we get into the auction tonight, is just like who you are and why people love Adam and why you've been able to build this brand in the contemporary art space around the body of work that you've collected over decades, and the unique angle that you have had collecting work, and how you ended up with an auction at Christie's titled Adam.
Well, just to go backwards, so I've been collecting art for a long time. I don't think everybody loves me. Here and there, I've been attacked, really broadside attacked by people like New York Magazine's Jerry Saltz, who wrote an insane hate letter to me several years ago, which is worth looking up and reading. And then about this sale, Kenny Schachter, who's someone around New York, like took the Christie's movie and like turned it into this like parody where like I have dollar signs in my eyes and money pouring out of my mouth. And then he went as far as to say that the whole sale, the Adam sale, is a copy of him, and that it was his idea, and everything that I did copied him. And I used to feel, personally attacked by different people in the media, but I learned a lesson along the way. I got a little thicker skin that, first of all, P.T. Barnum, who cares what they say about you as long as they spell your name right? I mean, it brings activity. And I also realized that people in the media, they're kind of in competition with each other. So if someone like me appears and makes a splash, I get a lot of eyeballs. They want to attack me to bring some of those eyeballs to them. They don't really care what they say. They just want to get some of my audience. And, why do I have an audience from time to time? It's I'm not sure exactly why, Derek. I don't think I've done anything particularly special or all that interesting, but I tell a story. I love storytelling, and I tell a story about my life, hanging out with Andy Warhol in like the mid 80s and going to see Michael Jackson with Basquiat and all that stuff. And then years later, just getting so excited about art collecting that I would invest all my time and all my resources into the artists that I met, the discovery of Murakami and Damien Hirst and Jeff Koons and Rudolf Stingel and Richard Prince, and how, for me, in my mind, somehow, these people were like, amazing, historic meetings, and that each one of them, I had something to learn and something personal and positive and inspiring that would like change my life, which perhaps is kind of silly and absurd, but it's also like, that's what things are about, is the energy, whether it's digital art, physical art, or Basquiat. It's like, it's all about the energy that we bring into it. I've had a lot of energy for art collecting, and so this sale became part of it. This is my third big auction moment in my collecting career.
Yeah, fantastic context, Adam, and so interesting to hear about those early days. If you don't mind for a moment, can you take us back there again just for a moment? Fascinated to hear about some of those early encounters and meeting folks like Murakami and Jeff Koons. What were you struck by when you met some of those folks? Was it an energy? Was it their work? Was it their sort of frame of mind and the way they thought about the world? Anything you can unpack there would be fascinating.
I thought it was kind of a zeitgeist moment, and that I was living the zeitgeist moment, and that somehow art history was being made. So that's why, like, when I met Eric Calderon, I was like, wow, is this guy making history? Yeah, this guy is history being made. And Basquiat was history being made, being in the factory, like being there. And, you know, spending time with Warhol, whether he liked me or I liked him or whatever, like, we spent time together. This was like a piece of history. And years later, I recognize it as such. I think that, you know, Takashi Murakami, Fondation Cartier, late 90s, early 2000s, made history. Maybe not so much now, but at that time, Damien Hirst, late 90s, the Sensation Show at the Brooklyn Museum, like, that's history. Jeff Koons in the late 80s, or when he made the Celebration pieces and went bankrupt in the early 2000s, like, that's art history. So I guess my excitement, Eli, is about, like, the history of art and being there and witnessing something. It's a bit like, if you ever heard of George Plimpton. So George Plimpton was a writer, and he ran the Paris Review for many years. He was sort of a fun, hard-drinking intellectual. And he used to write stories about, like, he'd take a pass for the New York Jets and get sacked, or he'd get up to the plate and, like, try to swing at a ball for the Yankees and, of course, get hit by the ball. But he experienced all these great moments in sports history. And I guess for me, I feel like I'm getting to experience great moments in art history and make some of them myself.
There's so much to unpack in what you described. I think everyone can appreciate you know, the adventure and the history making and the, you know, seeing the importance kind of start to form in real time as these moments are happening. But I think many collectors, and I think you maybe teased this out a bit in your book, Collecting Contemporary in 2006, many collectors in your cohort who were at these same exhibitions, who were at these same, you know, early auctions, who were studying these artists just like you, failed to, you know, start collecting when you did. And I think you can just look at some of the early entry points you made into Basquiat or into Koons and see that reflected today and the importance and the gravitas that these artists have built around their collections and their work over time. And there's a massive delta there between when you started collecting them and where they exist in the line of history today. And I guess the second question, as an extension to just being able to see an opportunity, is being able to act on an opportunity. And I think a lot of folks are feeling their way in the dark right now with this new emerging ecosystem of digital art. And they're trying to get a sense for whether or not there's not just an opportunity, but then how to think about collecting around that opportunity.
Well, I don't really want to credit myself with anything special, but I think that I saw opportunities to make a difference, and I was excited by the fact that I could make a difference. That, you know, perhaps I was at a historic moment, and if I were able to acquire 10 works of Murakami instead of just one little thing, hey, suddenly I'd be, you know, influential in a moment in art history. Or if I were to buy Jeff Koons' Hanging Heart in 2004, well, wow, I'm the guy who owns a heart. And the other guys who own the heart were like Steve Cohen, billionaire, Francois Pinault, billionaire. And there's just little old me. And I'm like, whoa, I own the Hanging Heart. Well, I have a chip to play in this game. Like, suddenly I'm a player in the Jeff Koons world, or in the Murakami world, where, you know, I own Tantembo Puking. I own the great masterpiece. It's my painting. And I'm suddenly in negotiation with the Qatari government for their museum. Like, wow. So I think the art world gives us a beautiful ramp into thinking, both intellectual and social exposure to new people. I mean, I met you, Derek, through, you know, my interest in squiggles and the Flamingo DAO and understanding punks, because there was a collector of Tom Sachs called Mike Jacobellis who I was introduced to. And I'm like, well, why don't I own a punk? And which punk? Like, all of this social interaction, I view, came ultimately from the art world. So these were all things that I would say I did to enhance my life.
I love that framing, Adam. It makes a ton of sense.
Ask the question again. I'll give you a different answer.
Well, so, sort of carrying that through line a little further, Adam, you and Venus Over Manhattan have really been leading the way in such a compelling manner on the now digital art side. I know at the gallery at the moment, you have Beyond Digital exhibiting there. You guys had Squirrels at Nada. Talk to me a little bit about sort of what this moment now feels like and why you guys are leaning in such a real way. And what does that maybe look like for you and Venus Over Manhattan in the coming months and years ahead, do you think?
Well, I don't really do the digital thing so much because this is the art of my generation. I do it because this is a new revolution in the art world. And once again, I want to be there. Like, I want a seat at the table. I want to participate in this. I don't want to close my doors or close my mind. So my interest in digital is strictly about like the future and also a new audience. Like, even all of you are part of the new audience. Like, I never met you before. You weren't there 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So, like, this is interesting to interact with people, with Rafik Anadol, to, interact with Aaron Penne, to meet Tyler Hobbs, Dmitry Cherniak, like all these people. I got to, enter into my life and think about them. And listen, some I love, some I love more, some I like less. What's the difference? It's part of this very interesting open world, that new world that I want to be open-minded to. And what happened was, years ago, Banksy did this kind of bootleg show in LA where he rented his own warehouse and invited all these celebrities. It had nothing to do with the gallery. It had nothing to do with the art world. And he just ripped off this like big show in LA, and everyone was very into it. And he kind of threw salt at the art world in so doing, because he bypassed any of the galleries, any of the critics, anything. And I remember at the time, I was not into it. And I was like, what's this guy doing? Why would anyone take this seriously? And even to this day, I frankly still disagree with his politics and the facile way in which he throws around issues of politics. That being said, I can't deny that he's had a huge impact on the art world. I mean, he sold works for $12 million at auction. Like, this is a major thing. So I promised myself I'll never make that mistake again. I will never be closed to new ideas and new thoughts. I need to stay open in my life and in my thinking. And so if people are into it, like, I want to know why. I want to understand why. And I also think that, like, even last year within my team and my gallery at Venus here, I got a lot of pushback on anything digital. They're like, NFT. I'm like, you don't even know what an NFT is. What is an NFT? It's just a token. It's a way to put some content on a token. This is going to be a future, no matter what. And they're like, oh, this is bad. This is speculation. This is this is that. I refused all of those thoughts, and I decided to go ahead with doing the shows that I believed in. But now I feel like a year later, this is already changing. Like, this Rafik Anadol moment at MoMA made everyone kind of bite their tongue a bit. And look, when the Calder Foundation issued an NFT, everyone's like, what do you think? What do you think? I'm like, I don't really think that what I think matters that much. But I see that they're doing it. And I think when they do it, everyone will do it. The Picasso Foundation will issue an NFT, and the Metropolitan Museum will issue a token. And suddenly we could be in a world where there's all sorts of different tokens for different purposes. And it takes me back to something that Derek said to me about collab and currency. And I was like, well, are you focused only on NFTs? Because that would only be a part of the blockchain. Why would you only be focused on NFTs? And Derek said, basically, almost everything will ultimately be on some form of NFT. So I really think that way for the art world too. There's all sorts of ways to do this, all sorts of purposes. And so, Eli, I just wanted to be part of it.
Yeah. So well said, Adam. We don't have very much time with you. You've got an auction to get to, but I would really love for you to maybe describe what folks can expect tonight. We're recording this in the morning of March 9th. You've got this amazing auction with a lifetime body of work that will be shown. It includes pieces by Warhol, by Jeff Koons, by Damien Hirst, by Murakami. You even have vintage motorcycles in there and end capped with a Beeple piece. So there's an amazing article in the New York Times that was written about you and this auction tonight and who you are as a collector over many decades. And it was clear to Eli and I, as we were kind of talking about how we wanted to structure this show, that you were really presenting a lifetime's worth of work and telling a story about yourself through this auction tonight. And it would be fantastic if you could talk a little bit about that and how you thought about pulling the pieces together for this, the statement you're trying to make, and why you think that story has been so compelling for folks.
Well, so tonight's the Christie sale called Adam, and I hope you guys and your audience gets to check it out, plug into it. It's very interesting. It'll be online and in person. It's an interesting sale because it's an evening sale. So it's an entire mini kind of an evening sale just dedicated to one person, which is highly unusual because the big evening sales are November or May or London or Paris, a mixture of all different artists, all different people. And generally speaking, it's not named. So a single owner sale is often what happens when you die. So, Yves Saint Laurent has a single owner sale, or Karl Lagerfeld, or the collection of Andy Warhol. It's liquidated. So most often single owner sales are after someone's dead, or, it could be a chapter, but it's very rarely a story. And I thought this was an opportunity for me to take works in my collection, some things I've owned for over 20 years, and tell kind of a little autobiographical story about me, about what I like, to go from Calder from 1939 all the way to a Beeple Madonna from last year, and sort of give this broad range where there are 37 lots, only one piece per artist, with one or two small exceptions, only a single work representing something important about that artist, something that meant something to me. And I've also included works of design, 20th century design, which is collectible furniture, some of it worth over seven figures. And I threw in a 1974 Ducati just because I love motorcycles. I'm a motorhead. I love racing. And so that's just sort of, it's there as a design object. It's not there as a motorcycle. It's there as an aesthetic thing that kind of gives me inspiration. And the fun of the Adam sale is that it's mid-season. So this is a very quiet time in the auction market. It was a very risky thing to do, to just make it about me. How crazy is that? But they could do it because they had this pretty empty week. And I put in things at very attractive reserves. So I had another strategy where if the thing was worth $1, it's in at 50 cents. Now, some people are like, well, why would you do that? And I'm like, well, how could this work without that? It has to have sex appeal, it has to have zip, and it has to have a financial incentive for everyone participating. But I think the part of it that I'm happy about is that I was able to take a regular old sale and make a story out of it and tell a story. And Christie's was my partner in calling this Adam. And so it's fun. I mean, it's arrogant, it's pompous, it's bombastic, it's a bit ridiculous, but it's also super fun to think that Adam is now a thing unto its own, and the Adam collection can be sold all in one night and becomes its little part of art history.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Adam. And we're thrilled to get to spend some time with you today on such a big day. Wishing you huge luck this evening. We'll be following closely and hope that folks in our community will do so as well. I'm incredibly excited to see what the gallery does next over the coming weeks, months, and years ahead. So such a thrill to spend some time together, Adam, today.
Thanks, Eli. And hopefully you and Derek, two great minds, will come back to me and tell me what Adam Part 2 should look like.
I think we can manage that. We'll put our heads together and think through some details, Adam. Thanks for your time today, and good luck tonight. And we'll be watching closely. Awesome! What a great conversation with Adam. The dude is a legend. I'm so excited to see the auction tonight. It's actually at 6 p.m. Eastern, at 3 o'clock Pacific. It's going to be wild. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to kind of watch that go down. Eli, what was your takeaway from the convo?
Yeah, so I mean, we lost Adam for a little bit with the video, but still a great conversation. He's an OG, and it's so interesting to hear those early days and those early stories of his time with Warhol and Basquiat. So thrilled to talk to Adam and get his perspective. Yes, on his art collecting over the years, but particularly interesting to me and maybe us is how he's thinking about what's happening with this digital art renaissance at the moment. Yeah, and his conviction around this being a real movement that he's participating in the same way that he did 20, 30 years ago. So enjoyed the conversation. Always great to catch up with Adam.
Yeah, that was awesome. Well, guys, this was a fun one to rip off on Thursday, a little earlier than normal. Sam, you're a legend, dude. Thank you for jumping in last minute and gracing us with your data and analytics. It's always fun to get you on here. And Eli, it's fun to see the art vision at Proof start to extend into the Moonbird strategy. I know you have got an enormous amount on your plate from a strategy perspective right now, so it'll be fun to kind of parse through some of that with you in future episodes. Cool. Where can folks find you both?
For me, it's on Twitter, but really, just excited about the drop next week, March 15th with Pace Gallery. The entire team at Proof is working on that one in the lead up there. So that's where sort of my head's at and all my focus is at the moment. Sam?
Yeah, I'm at Punk9059 on Twitter, and normally that's where you can find me.
Dropping fire. All right, guys, this was awesome. We'll chat soon.
All right, that is it for this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you would like to help us out, head on over to proof.xyz and click on the reviews button at the very top and leave us a 5-star review. Thanks so much. Take care.